If you have followed this channel for any length of time, or my Instagram for that matter, you will know that I have something of a soft spot for the Adidas Nemesis 19.1 range and the 0.1 once they dropped the 19. And recently I achieved something that I, probably the only person in the world, is trying to achieve, and that was to have every single sole plate that was released in the Adidas Nemesis in my collection. I have now achieved that. And I thought, rather than just sitting here basking in the glory of all my Nemesises, I would use that as an opportunity to share with you the differences between sole plates in general. There seems to be a lot of misinformation out there and a lot of people who maybe just don't know. Companies aren't very good at helping you out. They don't really care. They just want your money. But the difference between an FG, an SG, an AG, the different types of AG, and for example, a HG boot can be quite complex. And well, I thought I'd break it down, make it a little bit easier for you, and do it all with every sole plate that was released in the Nemesis 19. So let's get into it with the most interesting one, I suppose, which is the FG plate. And yeah, hold on. Like, let's just, hold on. Yep. Cool, let's go. FG boots tend to be the most common, particularly amongst reviewers and collectors, because they have the most variation between them. They have the most interest. They do the most different things. For example, an SG boot with its 6 metal studs, which we'll come on to in a second, they all feel reasonably similar when it comes to traction. But with an FG boot, you get huge amounts of variation. For example, we have this brand new Mecurial sole plate with its super aggressive chevron bladed studs. These studs pushed right out onto the edge, very aggressive shape, loads of bite and traction in the ground, which is great, provided you are using them for an FG pitch. What is an FG pitch? It's a firm ground pitch, which is a firm natural grass. You don't want to be using these in general, definitely not something like this, on an AG or artificial ground pitch. These aren't going to be pitches that are too soft or too sloppy. They're definitely going to be pitches that have a little bit of give to them. You definitely get a little bit of bite into the ground. They're not too hard, not too soft. They're the full Goldilocks of pitches. They are just right. Not always what you're going to find in the UK and Ireland. Even if you look across at the Premier League, most players are going to be wearing an SG stud because the ground is that little bit softer. But FG the most interesting nonetheless. So we have the super aggressive FG, and these still FG studs, you can see, are completely different. This is a very traditional conical style pattern that you're going to get on a lot of older boots, like maybe the Copa Mundial, in this case the Lotto Stadio. This is the variation that you can get in an FG boot. Going across to the Nemesis, which of course we're doing, you can see here that you do have that more conical style, a lot of the conical studs, but you also have them slightly lower in profile to get slightly better purchase in the ground, and you also have these more elliptical style studs. The whole idea was that this would be a fairly agile stud pattern. It gives you good purchase in the ground. Now, because of the shape of the studs here, and particularly here, there is an argument to be made that these would be great for both an FG and an AG pitch. But you also have to take into account things like this, like the length of the stud. They're reasonably long on the Nemesis, and also durability. A lot of AG boots have additional durability elements added to them which aren't present here. But we'll get onto that when we get onto the AG boots. You'll notice here we also have a split sole design, so 2 little stud housings on the top of a sole plate board there, against a full one-piece sole plate there and there. You can get that across all different boot types, but tends to be more prevalent on FG and SG boots. So when should you buy an FG boot? Well, when you're playing on the FG pitches that I described earlier. And what FG boot is right for you? Well, that depends on what you're comfortable in more than anything else. What actually feels good on your feet, and to a degree, how good is the pitch that you're playing on. While this might be super aggressive, you might not want super aggressive traction. It might not be how you want to play. I absolutely do not believe in studs by studs. Kind of studs, boots by position, studs by position by extension, and therefore I don't think you need to be a winger to be wearing this aggressive stud pattern. If you're a winger and you feel more comfortable in a stud pattern like this, absolutely go for that. Go for what works for you, and you have so much option with an FG stud pattern. We will get into in another video some more details, like maybe weight and how that weight affects how the boot performs. The Nemesis, for example, is very sole plate heavy, and that affects how you're striking the ball. We'll get into that in another video, but I want to keep things reasonably simple this time round. The other obvious thing to mention is that all of these are essentially plastic. They can be different types of plastic, different variations, they can have different elements added to them, like they've got the punter flex here, you've got the air zoom unit here with the extra 4-foot fins, you've got the split sole we mentioned earlier, but essentially they all follow the same pattern. They are a plastic sole plate with plastic studs. Now, of course, you can get variations on that. Carbon fiber, for example, glass fiber previously with Nike, but that's all related to the sole plate rather than the stud pattern, and we're mainly focused on stud patterns here because that's the main difference between your different styles of sole plate. That makes sense. Moving on. Next up, we're going to jump into the realm of FGAG stud patterns. So this is that middle ground. It's a boot that is designed to work on both FG that we just spoke about and AG, which we'll get into immediately after this. And not all FG boots are FGAG, and there's very few that are now labeled as such. One of the boots that is labeled as such is this. This is the Puma Future 7 Ultimate, and this is labeled as an FGAG boot, which is absolute nonsense. Of all the boots almost I have on this table right now, this is the most insane choice for something to be labeled FGAG. I touched on earlier that you have your warranty. Your warranty essentially means that you can return the boot to the manufacturer provided you bought it from a reputable source, and you can get it replaced within a certain time period and provided you have used the boots correctly. So if they're an FG boot and you've used them on AG, you have voided your warranty. So you want to use them on the correct surface in order to keep hold of that warranty, because it's very useful to have. Don't void your warranty. In this instance, great, you can use them on FG and AG without voiding your warranty. You may look at these and think, great, I play on FG and AG artificial ground, so therefore these are a great option. These have just a ridiculous length of stud. And on top of that, look at the shape of these studs. You've got blades here, you have the diamond shaped studs here and here. This is absolutely not an FGAG boot, and it's borderline irresponsible of Puma to label it as such. I do not recommend this boot for an AG pitch. So what I'm really trying to say here is this video is important. You need to know your stuff. You need to know that when this is labeled as FGAG, if you go and have a look at it, that this is not a genuine FGAG option. This is unsafe. This is not a good idea for an AG pitch. Why is it no good for AG pitches? Well, it's the different way that AG pitches work. AG pitches tend to have a much greater hold. So when you step and you look to push off, because of the way that they're built and because of the way your boots react, it means you have a lot more grip in the turf. So you are far more likely to get stuck if you have long studs, and particularly if you have studs that aren't of a more rounded nature. Conical studs are ideal. And it also means that there's no soft ground underneath you. So you might get a lot more pressure pushing up on you through the sole plate, through the studs. So the fewer studs you have, the more pressure you're likely to get, the more likely you are to kind of maybe get blisters or damage your feet. If you get the extra grip and you're looking to turn and you don't turn, like your boot doesn't go because it's stuck in the ground, which is very likely to happen, and you just turn your knee, you're talking in the realm of ACL injuries here, and I know people this has happened to. So it is important that you don't start wearing boots like this on AG pitches, particularly in games where it's going to get heated and you're going to need to move quickly. Not doing anyone any favors, so get the right stud pattern for the right surface and be sure you know what you're talking about, because those Pumas are a joke. And yeah, these are just labeled as FG, but definitely not for AG. So what is an FGAG boot? You could take something like this. So this is the brand new Lunar 2 and GX2 AG sole plate. So this AG sole plate is actually in a position where the studs are long enough and there's enough of them to be great on AG, but would also be a good FG option. The problem here is potentially if you don't have a particularly nice AG surface. There are different types of AG surface. When I say AG, we're not talking about sand-based turf. We are talking about the stuff that has the rubber crumb and has kind of the fake grass on it, should we say, artificial grass, hence the name of the surface. So we want to make sure that that's what we're on, and then depending on how good that is or how worn that is will depend on how good or how aggressive a pair of boots you can get away with. If it's particularly nice, something like the new Mecurial sole plate, which I reviewed recently, the Mecurial AG, is actually going to be excellent. It doesn't have a lot of studs and it doesn't have particularly short studs, but it's great for that kind of pitch, which also means, similar to this, it would be great for an FG pitch. And if we take this, which is what's on the new AG Lunar, and we compare it to this, which is very similar, which is the old GX FG plate, well, you can see they're kind of similar. They have the same number of studs, and all we've really done is taken out some of the slightly more aggressive ones and replaced them with conical studs. So in that element, you could probably get away with this on a nice AG surface as an FGAG option. Remember, as I said earlier about your warranty, this would indeed void that. And again, as I mentioned earlier, this more than likely has no additional reinforcement for durability on an AG pitch. Now, I can't guarantee that this one does either, and I don't actually think it does, but frequently you will find an AG boot has some additional durability elements, and that can come in two forms. One being the sole plate itself can be a bit thicker, more durable, and that's because AG pitches tend to put a lot more strain on your boots. There's a lot more heat and there's a lot more abrasion. It's a lot harder on your boots. So having that slightly more durable sole plate is very welcome. And more often than not, you're going to get something around the toe here, which is going to help bond these two together more strongly, because this is where you're most likely to get separation, particularly on an AG pitch. The new Puma AG outsoles have that on them, which is great to see, not the ultimate FGAG nonsense that we just threw away, but for example, the new Puma Ultra Ultimate AGs seem to have some really great AG tech. So FGAGs are a great option if you're looking to play on two surfaces and only buy one pair of boots, but make sure that you're getting the one that is going to be good for the type of AG that you're playing on. Be aware that if it's not genuinely labeled as FGAG, you may be ruining your warranty, and also that you might not get the durability that you would off a standard, a proper, what's the word I'm looking for? An assigned AG boot. And speaking of AG boots, let's move on to them. Now, very interestingly, when Adidas released the Nemesis, they ended up having two different AG options for you. The first one being the original AG option that was launched, which is this one here. Adidas were using this AG plate across a lot of their boots, and you can see that this has a lot of conical studs. So all those things I was talking about, it's got you covered. These are pretty short, so you're not going to get excessive amounts of stud pressure. You have lots of them, so you're going to reduce the stud pressure. They're all conical and there's many, so your ability to twist and turn without getting stuck in the AG is going to be exceptional. This is all designed really well for an AG pitch. I also believe that there is an extra piece of internal taping around here for durability. This is a good AG outsole. Now, sometimes companies don't do a great job with their AG outsoles and putting the time, money and effort into them that they do with their FG plates, and they can end up having some fatal flaws. For example, this one is altogether too flexible. They haven't put the requisite time, effort, money into developing something that has the stiffness and stability that you want through the boot, and it's far too different from what you had on the original Nemesis as well. A boot that's currently doing this very well is that Mecurial I referenced earlier, because you still get the air zoom unit. A boot that did this particularly poorly would be something like the Speedflow here, where the Carbotex insert was not available on the AG boots and was only available on the FG and SG. It's kind of poor showing, so do be aware that you might not get all the tech, but companies are getting better at this. Now, the second type of AG outsole that Adidas had was this one here. So this came after this one, and in my opinion was an upgrade, because as you can see, it wasn't soft as Dairy Lee in the middle of it. You've still got a lot of studs. They are slightly more aggressive. There is less of them, but this is still a solid outsole for AG. And again, it is definitely got that durability element built into it. This is a very durable feeling outsole. Now, as I mentioned, you are going to get different types of AG pitches, and each of these could be argued that they're better for a different type. Those worse, more worn, older AG pitches could be much better with something like this. Something like this could work a lot better for you. And a good example that seems to come up quite regularly for this is the Puma MG. That's a really good option for covering those poor, like really old or quite worn AG pitches. Something like this is what you're looking for here, or something like we spoke about, like the Mecurial and FGAG option would be better for your more newer pitches, the pitches that have that little bit longer pile in them. They're just nicer. You can get away with something that doesn't quite have so many studs. But to be honest, this would probably work for both of those options as well. There are a few companies, quite handily, who've started to pick up on this. Adidas and Puma on the new Ultra and Adidas on the Predator, are now offering different variations of AG outsole. They're offering something for a 3G pitch and for a 4G pitch, so something for those older, not quite as nice pitches, and something for those nicer pitches. Again, you'll notice that those older ones are going to have a lot of studs, and those newer ones are going to have fewer studs and maybe slightly longer studs, because you can get away with it and it performs that little bit better, gives you that bit more traction. And as I say, you can get away with it. At no point here are we talking about sand-based turf. If that's what we're talking about, you need to go and get something like a TF shoe, which are completely fine for some of these AG pitches I'm talking about. I'm not a huge fan, but if you're on sand-based turf, flat stuff, no boots, go and get yourself some TF or turf shoes. Before we move on to the SG boots, which are very popular here and in the UK, almost a necessity at times, I want to talk about this. So this is an HG or hard ground outsole, and these generally are only available in places like Japan. The type of pitches that they have in Japan lend themselves to this kind of outsole. It's a very dry, very hard ground, and these tend to be very durable, and you can see they have a very similar setup to what you're going to get from some of those AG outsoles, but the studs are a little bit longer, maybe offer you a little bit more variation, and on the whole, a HG outsole can be excellent, particularly when it does come to durability. This one is pretty nice, and again, much better than that original Adidas AG. So if you are interested or playing on a lot of hard ground, maybe, I don't know, we've got friends in Texas, check out the Bootcast podcast. These guys play a lot, I would imagine, on very hard surfaces out in Texas, and something like a hard ground Soleplate, which again, probably only going to be able to get from places like Japan. Check out Tokyo Football on Instagram. They're going to be your go-to. This will be something that you should be looking at. Yes. That sounds right. And that is your look at hard ground boots. All right, let's talk about SG or soft ground boots. What are you using SG or soft ground boots for? You are going to be using them for soft ground. Surprise, surprise. So imagine your firm ground has been rained on a lot and the ground has got a little bit soft. You're maybe going to slide a little bit. In an FG boot, you need more grip, you need more traction. Well, what you go and do is you go and add these 6 metal studs to your boots, and this is how you're going to get soft ground. There are multiple variations of soft ground boots, particularly from Nike, this being the anti-clog variation. Now this doesn't have removable metal studs. These are plastic studs with metal stud tips, and the whole idea is that anti-clog is a coating which, when it gets wet, forces or causes the mud to kind of fall off. It means that your boots don't get clogged and you get better traction. Now, Nike do seem to be doing away with this particular style of stud. It's not available on the new Mecurial, but the alternative is this, which is the removable 6 studs. You can see they're in exactly the same place. It just doesn't have the anti-clog coating on this one, but this does tend to be preferred by maybe pros who are playing on nice pitches. If you're playing on a particularly poor pitch, anti-clog could be very beneficial. I do have a video coming on this soon comparing anti-clog, the regular SG Pro as they call it, and then this. So this is a converted outsole. I want to do a big shout out to bootman.ie who did this conversion for me. I'll get subscribed to check out the video. And this is an FG boot that has been converted with SG studs. SG studs can be adjusted. You can see here, I hope, that these are 11s and these are 13s, and you can adjust them depending on how good or bad your pitch is. So you do have some adjustability in what kind of studs you use and how effective they are on the pitch. So a converted outsole is something you see a lot on pros, mainly I find because of the weight. A converted outsole can be a little bit lighter, or it just gives you the option to keep hold of your favorite FG boots and have them converted over. Interestingly, if you do have an anti-clog pair with stud tips that have worn down, I believe you can also get these converted to kind of save your boots. Again, bootman.ie, check him out, he'll help you out with that. But in essence, an SG boot is quite simply an FG boot with 6 metal studs added, or that is the modern way. This is what would be known as an SG mix sole plate, because it is a mix of the metal studs with the plastic studs. And Puma, I believe, again, they label their boots as such. They are literally labeled as an SG MX, the MX being the mix because there is a mix of studs. This is essentially how SG boots are built, what you get from them these days. However, previously, and I don't think you should sleep on this, previously you could get something like this. This is a 6 stud SG boot, and again here you can see we've gone for 13s and 15s in the stud. So this is for your really muddy pitches, and this is what this is great for. We've spoken about anti-clog and how that can move mud away, stop your boots getting clogged up and stop you losing traction. Well, I think a 6 stud is exceptional at that. If you have the option to pick up a 6 stud from something and you're maybe not, if you play on particularly bad pitches, I don't think you can beat a 6 stud. Torrential rain, Sunday league, this does a phenomenal job, and I think it's just been phased out because it's not in fashion, and a 6 stud is still an excellent option for your SG or soft ground pitch. Also mentioning with SG boots, so you can do things like this. So this is an SG boot that I have added these particular studs to. So these are the Smart Power studs. They were very popular a few years ago because Ronaldo and Pogba were both seen using them, and it just converts what you can do with your SG boots and gives you a variety of options. And this lends itself to my other point, which is that more and more popular is becoming this idea of taking your SG boots, removing those metal studs and adding in plastic or nylon tipped studs to the end of your boot so that you can then wear it on an FG pitch and also on an SG pitch. Now, I haven't tried this myself, and in the past I have generally warned people against it because my concern would be that you're still going to end up with studs in these 6 positions that are too tall, and they're essentially going to give you stud pressure in those areas. However, I haven't tried it. There does seem to be some good options out there at the moment, some companies doing some good stuff. Maybe a video I need to make where you can convert your SG back into FG. I would not recommend doing that in any way for an AG pitch, but just so that you know, it is an option. So that's a pretty in-depth breakdown of different types of stud patterns for different surfaces without going into things like maybe split soles versus one pieces and insole boards and various things like that. If you want to see something like that, leave me a comment down below, get subscribed to the channel, and you should check out this video right here. It's a good one, I promise. I'll put a good one there.